right.
All right.
Okay. MCP,
Um,
MCP, MCP.
That's us today, MCP server. Oh, we have Jaco here.
I can be Yako. I can try to be Yako.
Oh no, he's here. I add him to the stage.
Oh, Yako's here?
I am
Yeah.
here.
Oh, I didn't. You were not obligated to come by.
To
I really
join.
didn't think you would show up. This is a pleasant surprise. I wish I would have prepared like walk-on music for you or something.
Me too. So for everyone who is watching, we are already live. Jaco also works at Fiberplane as an engineer, and he was mainly involved in building the MCP client side for our Codegen platform. And we were not aware, well, we invited him, but we were not 100% aware if he will join or not. So I'm super happy that you are here, Jaco.
It's nice to be here.
Is it though? Tell us what you really think.
I needed to do some research into all the auth flows and stuff like that to refresh my memory a little bit.
Well, okay, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I was also refreshing a bit, so I didn't like PKCE, right? So I wanted to make sure that I knew what that stood for because I can never remember. And then I realized people don't say PKCE, which is funny because like several months ago, working on auth with our other colleague Steph, we kept being like trying to say it fast, talk fast about auth. We'd be like PKCE. And people say Pixie, apparently, is something I learned. And that's much easier to say. So, but we can get into that in a second. Did we already say what we're talking about today? Did we already talk about that, or have we just been talking about Jaco?
Oh, well, you said at the beginning very often MCP, MCP. So right. I think maybe
MCPs,
people have
auth and MCPs.
And I think the main purpose is to talk a little bit how we do those things at Fiberplane with our platform, and also how people can get started when they want to include auth into their MCP servers.
Okay. All right. So I think maybe brief interlude is why. Okay, MCP servers can have authentication, authorization on top of them. And that has to be handled both by the MCP client and the MCP server. There was not a rigid specification of how to do this until June, about a month ago. And that means that there were a lot of different ways to do this leading up to that. And now there is one way, according to the spec, which is to use OAuth 2.1, which requires a lot of initial effort, I would say, and it's not that easy. I don't know if that's Jaco. Do you agree with this recap?
Yeah. Anytime something OAuth comes up, it's like bouncing back and forth between this goes here and then to the server, and then another thing in the background happens. You need to store stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, I think Jaco and I were both working. We were working on separate things, but with similar pain points. So I was working on getting our code generation to work with making an MCP server that uses auth. So that's kind of on the server side. So I wanted us to be able to generate an MCP server that supports an auth flow and can communicate to an MCP client, hey, you're not authorized, please, or authenticated, please use this link to log in. And it can use that when the client presents that link to a user, the user can log in, and then the MCP client would be able to make authorized, authenticated requests. So that was my world, which, as Jaco mentioned, was bouncing around a lot between things and debugging what was going wrong. Jaco, what were you up to?
So I would say regarding this, I was involved in the later stage of getting OAuth support working for MCP. So I worked on the part where in our chat, you want to be able to connect to MCP servers. And the thing where I got involved was some servers required auth, and then things didn't work. So that's where I came in.
Yeah.
I guess.
But before we only could use MCP servers without authentication in our chat, right? So sorry,
Yeah.
hard words.
I guess live demo, not to put you on the spot.
Live demo is on.
You can see what I've been up to here. This is this was a test. Don't worry, a lot of 404s. And so let's see here. I have no MCP servers connected. Does anyone know the linear MCP server off the top of their head? Connect to
linear
MCP server. I think it's
/m/mcp.linear.app/. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
SSD, I think.
Linear MCP server URL.
MCP.
.linear.app/.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. All right, go away. /SSE. So what's going to happen here? Boom. All right, well, I'm at this on the live stream. Someone's going to use my auth URL. No, that should be fun. All right, perfect. So authentication worked. And, whoa, wait, what? Why are you deploying? Okay, our agent's confused. At this point, I logged in with Linear, and now I have tools from Linear accessible in my chat in Fiberplane. So theoretically, I could bring in, if I filed a Linear ticket for something I wanted to do on Fiberplane, I could have the agent fetch that information and then use it to complete a task. And so that, but this is what Jaakko made work consistently. Is you want to connect to an MCP server. It's a protected resource, and so you need to visit a URL to log in. And on the Fiberplane side, we have to do a bunch of fancy things to make sure that that works correctly. What was broken, if you can, in vague, or not vague terms, but without getting too nitty gritty?
So when I started debugging things, like what was going on, because in our UI it looked like it was sort of hanging, busy, and not doing anything. And then I started investigating, and it turned out it was sort of refreshing tokens in the background all the time. So it was making a request, and then the request failed, and it was like, oh wait, I need a new token for this, and I would just keep sending the same or a similar request, basically firing a whole bunch of requests to this.
Surprised that we didn't get complaints from these. Like that's that would feel like some sort of brute force attack on the auth server. Probably just like, what is fiberplane.com and should we block them?
What are they doing?
Okay, cool. And all right, so my sense when I was working on things was, okay, well, did you, Jaakko, encounter any inconsistencies between how different MCP servers implemented auth? Like, did you have to deal with, there's a spec now, and the spec should be followed, but was that the case for you? Was that a cause of any problems?
I actually didn't compare the spec the way it should work through the spec. I was just, I had a couple of goals, and the most important was that it would just work. It's not about being right according to the spec. It just needed to. I had a couple of MCP servers that I knew needed to work, that I tested with. And one was Linear, and the other one was Context 7.
Yeah, nice. But that's
there were two. There was one with there was one, and as this already couple of weeks ago. I forget what my test URLs were, but there was one that had both /SSE, so I had like a server-side events, and one had was /MCP, so those were streaming HTTP. That was a streaming HTTP endpoint, and they both worked differently. I needed to fix like both transports differently.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of the like Wild West of working with this stuff right now. Is I mean, theoretically, in the coming months, things should coalesce around streamable HTTP, a single way of doing auth. But even like something that I kind of noticed. So yeah, I don't know if this goes too into the weeds, but it's just like the way that the MCP client asks for the like protected resource, which is really the stuff on the MCP server, was different between the MCP inspector and cursor or Cloud Code. And so like the theoretically spec compliant flow from the MCP inspector didn't really work with a lot of stuff, or it was so rigid, and like other MCP clients weren't following it as rigidly. I think that's one thing that I kind of stumbled across. Yeah. Okay, so pause for yeah.
But maybe like a good bridge to what you've been building. What would be, if you built your server, what would be the go-to way to go about auth? Do you have, because you were working on that side, right? Have you figured out what would be the ideal path of doing authentication for MCP servers?
Okay, so I found very similar to what Jaco just said. I was focused on making something that works. And I didn't have a lot of time to, I'm not like so confident I would say everyone should do it this way. But okay, so a couple of notes here are that we generate Honc apps, right, on our platform. Honc apps are like, we also make the decision to use Drizzle. That has some extra baggage when you're generating apps in a serverless environment like we do. But one of the benefits is that so Drizzle plugs into this library called BetterAuth, and eventually we kind of want like general authentication support with the apps that we generate. So a couple of parameters that I was working with was like, okay, try to make it work with BetterAuth, because then we can also build on top of that with different auth providers and things like that. So typically, in my mind, an MCP server that's authenticated has to still, like, it's going to delegate authentication to some other service. It's like, it's not necessarily its own standalone service with its own auth. Like, it might bounce to you know, a GitHub provider and things like that. And so that is a little bit easier with a library here. Maybe so it's not just my face talking. I can share screen again. Basically, I wanted like something kind of plug and play so that we could build on top of it with other auth related work we wanted to do. And it turned out, so BetterAuth is here. It turned out that they had, well, they have an integration with Hono, which we use, and they have an adapter for Drizzle, which is very, very handy. So that means like your user models and a lot of database models that you need for maintaining state in an OAuth flow are handled automatically, which means it's less instructions to give. Well, yeah, instructions to give to the agent, and you can kind of just tell it like, use this code, it'll work. There's some other dragons that come with that, but in the end, it did work for us. And then they have a concept of plugins. And one of their more recent plugins is MCP. So there's a lot of decisions that the plugin makes along the way, or assumptions it makes about the environment. And so there was one kind of like hack I had to layer in on top of this MCP plugin in order to make auth work the way that we wanted to for generated apps. Yeah, at the end of the day, that was kind of the thing that I was working on. It's like, how do you make an MCP server written inside a Honc app work with authentication? And so actually, I have some open source Scratch work, which is nice because the rest of the stuff is kind of closed source in our repo. But we can put this in the show notes.
Nice.
It's a great name, Better Auth Weather MCP OAuth GitHub. I wish I was tired and running out of creativity with how to name this. But this is an example of authenticated MCP server that delegates auth over to GitHub. So it's like your API would also be something with which someone could log in with GitHub or your service. And so the MCP plugin in this case would handle a lot of the like wiring for routes that the MCP client needs to know about in order to know where to like fetch a login URL and stuff like that. And then there's like kind of a separate section of the API that handles the login with GitHub. And this is very close to what you would see in a generated app on Fiberplane at this point. I don't know if we want to dig into the code because I've been talking for a long time.
I have a question, Brad.
Yeah.
I have directly a question because I saw that a few people had the question only to integrate BearAuth in a Honc app. I think that repo also will help them, right? Even though they don't build an MCP with the Honc stack, they will only have a simple backend API or whatever. This is also a good starting point to see how to integrate with BearAuth. Am I correct? Or
you are correct. Yeah, I don't know if we want to talk about that necessarily, but as a very quick version is where would I find this? Lib auth. Basically, you can just remove all the MCP stuff from here, and it would work with GitHub Auth instead. And then there's some other funkiness with like, so Better Auth, the way that it works with Drizzle is that it generates database schemas for all the things that it needs. And so it's a little bit of a different setup than when we have in our templates. You just need you point Better Auth to a different file where it can generate Drizzle schemas, and it'll add things like your user, etc. And then you need to, in your schema that comes with the template, you just kind of export things from wherever you put your auth schemas. And the reason this works is that there's kind of like a separate script for placing all of those schemas into that file. And you don't want to overwrite, if you have other database schemas, you don't want to like overwrite them when you regenerate your auth related schemas. I feel like this is very abstract, but hopefully that's a good enough summary. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Nice. But I think it's nice to see some code and to see, I mean, I feel it gets more practical once you see something. So I think that's a help.
I don't know if
I don't know. You are the like we.
Well,
I
so
feel
yeah, I feel like we could do no. The thing is, I didn't prep. I know I have somewhere in that long list of projects on fiberplane.com the first working authenticated MCP server that I built, and I was like, oh, we could try to connect it to a chat as kind of the the final thing. But yeah.
Well, can you find it, or is it just like?
Well, I have the URL. Okay, actually, Nella, I'm gonna send you the URL.
Me, okay.
Yeah. Do I have the URL? You could also try to connect to it from another thing, or I don't know. We could try generating one right now, but we're reaching the 20-minute mark. Let's see here.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. Also, while we're negotiating this, Jaco, any thoughts on design decisions of writing the MCP server. I know you'd, now's the time. We're doing code review right now, everyone.
Yeah, we need to basically. I made some. We're using like a patched version of the agents SDK with some of our own auth fixes sprinkled in. We need to. Ideally, we would create a PR.
Yeah, I think
things upstream because it's really scary. We've had once where somebody was like, I needed to use the latest version of the agents SDK, and then
breaks the patch.
Reapply the patches.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a funny thing that we both ended up having to do. Is like all of this stuff is so new, and it can be such a moving target that you end up having to patch stuff. So like I didn't go into the details, but the one of the hardest things for me to debug along the way was this behavior. I'm wondering if I could quickly replicate it locally. Probably not. It was this behavior from, so with the MCP plugin from BetterAuth, I would get the URL. So I would go into Cursor, and I would say authenticate with this server, which was my server. And it would give me a URL. And then I would open my network tab. I would do for my browser inspector, I would click preserve log, which is very important to do when you're working with OAuth and trying to debug things. And what that does is it'll preserve all the network requests that happen across you bouncing between sites. So instead, usually when you refresh page, all the network requests refresh as well, which is not helpful if you're debugging redirects. So I would get the URL back in my MCP client. I would copy it into my browser, make sure that the inspector was open, and it would correctly bounce me to, so it'd say, okay, 401, sorry, not 401. It would bounce me to the login page. Login page would then bounce me to our login with GitHub. GitHub goes to the correct callback URL, and then that callback URL, for some reason, was rendering a JSON object that told me to redirect to my MCP client. This is very funky. It was like the callback URL should have redirected directly to the MCP client, and then you would get a notification, and it's like, okay, open in Cursor. And you say, yes, open in Cursor, and then you're authenticated. But instead, my browser was just showing a JSON object that said like, success, true, redirect URI, Cursor. And it was driving me crazy because I was like, I can see it right there. I can see it right there. And then, so typically when you do redirects too, you get it'll be like a 302, and then the browser knows where to go because of the location header. So it's 302, and then you have a header that tells you, okay, go here. What was also driving me crazy was that it was a status code 200, and it rendered JSON, but it had a location header of where to go next. So it's like, so I had to dig into the internals of BetterAuth, and I kind of saw what was going on, and then I wrote a plugin that basically modifies that behavior so that it will actually follow the redirect instead of rendering JSON. That was probably, I mean, there were a lot of, it was a journey to get this thing to work, but yeah, that was the final moment where like I was like, oh my gosh, it works.
I thought I fixed everything, and then I started testing with the linear MCP server, and it said just invalid request.
Yeah,
and
love that
like,
one.
Okay, but
request. I don't like it. I just don't like the request. No. I'm realizing like any discussion on OAuth needs visualizations or animations or anything. Otherwise, it's just like, it's too much state for the human brain to like hold of like, you bounce here to bounce there to bounce there and then back. It was one of those things where
I could at least follow when you were like, oh, I had to open cursor from cursor to, you know, like you get those.
Yeah.
Should we? I think I can't connect your MCP server to our Fiberplane chat because I get an authentication error on our Fiberplane platform.
When you try to log in with Fiberplane, or
yeah, I get it. Like I don't know why I was logged out, but I had to log in with GitHub, and I think maybe I don't know if we talk too much about authentication this stream, but I get a server error now.
Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah, this could also be like that was the very first one, and I may have changed some stuff since then. Yeah, that's funny.
I've also seen if the authentication URL is in our chat. Sometimes it's a little bit older, stale, or I prefer to use the UI.
I should probably show that.
Chat input.
Okay, sharing my screen for the 20th time. All right, fiberplane.com.
Sharing is caring.
Sharing is something. Okay, already connected this MCP server. So you're talking about connecting through this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is my MCP. Hope this works is the name. Okay, so I get the authenticate. All right, so this is where it's going to get. I'm already trying to think of what. You know what? So, all right. So network tab, preserve log. Disable cache, also helpful. Let's authenticate. Oh, you know what? Okay. What do we get? Correct state? Okay, I think there's just something wrong with the code. OAuth flow complete. Invalid OAuth configuration. Okay. I think I know what's going wrong. All right. Well, I'll try to debug this later. I think it's just an old app. Also sad that I lost my. Interesting. Okay. Oh yeah, I don't need to debug this right now. I just think I just need to tweak our auth server.
I mean, if you start debugging this, this turns into like a longer stream, I would say.
Yeah.
So, but I think that was I think we can wrap it up here if you don't have anything to add. So I think that's a good overview of how we went internally with authentication MCP servers and our thinking around it.
Yeah. Wait 1 second. I lost everyone. I can't find my screen.
You can't find us.
You guys, do you hear me? You hear me?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
There.
We see you and hear you.
Okay. Oh, that was scary. That was really scary. Okay, we talked about auth for 30 minutes. I think that's.
I think.
Who's ready for 30 more?
Maybe next week.
Yeah. What are we talking about next week?
Oh, next week we start our Wipe Summer Challenge. So, and we will present the challenge and we will talk a little bit more about participating in Wipe Summer. We probably give an example of how the first challenge could be solved in a creative way. And then we let people off wipe coding for Wipe Summer.
Sweet.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Nice. So I end the stream. This is the magic button.
Bye.